All right, so this is going to be a rating analysis of Brandon Carter. So we're going to see what his overall rating is. So his overall rating is a 5.6. So how rare is that? That's 1 in 3 people. His side facial harmony score is a 42.2%. His front facial score is a 12%. So when you're looking at 12%, some of it was due to him being bald, but even if he wasn't bald, it'll still be closer to the 12% just for that reason. And another thing is the reason why his overall rating did go up is because of his facial dimorphism kind of boosted it up, which pretty much means he got more masculinized traits about his facial structure, and his body fat percent is very, very good. Probably ideal body fat percentage in his face. He got a very leaned out face. And yeah, so those are the two things. And the miscellaneous features are the miscellaneous factors that factor in kind of like any type of asymmetry or just I only took out a little bit of points for him being bald, but pretty much that's really it. He has good skin. He has very dark eyebrows. Pretty much everything else looks pretty almost flawless, to be honest with you. So other than that, his facial harmony score is pretty much the base of everything. So this is the rarity score of all the celebrities, so you can get a good idea of what some of your favorite celebrities might be. So his eye space ratio is a 48.3%. It's on the wider. He has wider set eyes. Now, since he's bald, it does affect your facial thirds. And as y'all guys can see, his largest facial thirds is the top of his forehead. And the second is the lower third, which you want your lower third to be more dominant than your middle third, which is good. But his facial thirds overall is not ideal just because he's bald. So being bald can drastically affect the way you look. Here, his canthal tilt is a 2-degree canthal tilt. His facial width to height ratio is a tier 6, which is not good. That's a huge flaw. His face is a bit too compact. His jaw frontal angle is a flaw as well. It is too flat. His jaw is just too flat. Or his mandible, I mean, is just too flat. Cheekbones, high settingness, how high his cheekbones are relative to his face. It is another flaw again at 52%. He has low set cheekbones. Bigonial width, how wide is his jaw compared to his cheekbones? Some of y'all are wondering why the line is so low. I'm gonna show you guys later why the line is that low. He does have a very long ramus, as y'all guys can see from the side of his face, pretty much from the ear down to the bottom of his jaw, and that's pretty much where the jaw kind of curves down to the mandible, and that's exactly where the gonian is. So I go from the gonian to the cheekbones, and it's 78%. Total facial height to width ratio. So the facial height to width ratio, since he's bald, is not going to be ideal. As y'all guys can see, it's a tier 6, so that is a huge flaw. Chin to philtrum ratio. His chin to philtrum ratio is not ideal. His philtrum is a bit too short for his chin. He has a very long, overpowering chin, so that is a big flaw. His neck width is not a flaw. He does have a pretty wide neck, but his cheekbones is that much wider, so it would have been closer to a tier 1 if his cheekbones wasn't as wide. His mouth to nose width ratio, isn't really that bad, honestly. It's almost near ideal. So that's really not too much of a flaw. That's near ideal. Mid face ratio, like I said again, his face is just too compact. It's too squeezed in. Like I said again, he has very wide set cheekbones, but his face, the all of the features in his face are just a little bit too close together. So that's why his mid face ratio is not ideal, but is in the normal range, but it's still not ideal. Eyebrow settingness. So his eyebrow settingness is mid to low, not mid, not. So his eyebrows are not too high, it's not too low, it's in between, so it's mid to low, which is pretty good. His eye spacing is almost one with eyes apart. He still gets a tier 2 for it, which is still good. His eye aspect ratio is 3.3, which is pretty much good. It's almond shaped eyes, so that's good. His lower lip to upper lip ratio is still not ideal, but it's not too bad. It's a tier 3 flaw. His deviation from his mid face to his jaw is a 6 degree difference, which is pretty good. That's a not really a flaw. That's near ideal. His eyebrow tilt is 7.5, which is pretty high tilted eyebrows, and that is a tier 1, so that is ideal. His bitemporal width, so pretty much the forehead width to the cheekbone width is 87%, which is ideal. Lower third proportions is not ideal. His lower third is proportions is too much. It's at 41%. It needs to be at 33%, so that deviates too much by around 8%, I believe. So that is not ideal. But he still gets a tier 3, which is still in the normal range. His interlateral angle is 104, so that pretty much means his eyes is wide set, so that is a flaw, but not a major flaw. His gonial angle is very good, is near ideal at 124 degrees, is still a tier 2. His nasal frontal angles to see how protrusive his brow ridge is relative to the nose, and that is a tier 1, so that is not a flaw, that is ideal. So like I said, with his mandible being flat, with his jaw being extremely flat and parallel to the ground, as y'all guys can see, the mandible inclination is at 7%, and that is very, very small, and that is a big flaw. You want your mandible to be swung down enough. His mandible is not swung down enough. It's literally parallel to the ground, and you do not want that. That is very feminizing. His ramus to mandible ratio is very long. As y'all guys can see, that line is very long compared to the other line on the bottom. So his ramus is just that much longer. He does have a very long ramus. His facial convexity from the glabella is at 172 degrees. So that means his face is not too flat or not too round. It's very good. His submental curvicle angle is a bit too high, and it really isn't because of his body fat percent or his high hyoid. He doesn't really have a high hyoid at all. It's just because of his neck. His neck is pretty much his posture is kind of off. That's why his neck is stretched out like that. So, and I looked at multiple pictures. That's literally how he positions his neck. So, if he could fix his posture, his submental curvicle angle could be much better. So that is a flaw. His nasal facial angle is at 12 degrees. And the reason why it's at 12 degrees, and that's pretty low, you want it to be closer to the 30 to 40 degree angle around there. Really 30 to 36 degrees, what you want. And the reason why is because his chin is very protrusive, or his jaw is very protrusive, and his nose is not protrusive enough and is kind of down swinging. So his nose kind of goes downwards rather than forwards. So that's kind of why the angle is at 12 degrees, which is very low. His nasal labial angle, like I said again, it determines how downturned the nose is relative to the face, and like I said again, it is pretty much downswung. So 76 degrees is pretty low. What you want is around the 90 to 95 degrees. Like I said again, with this other angles, these two angles kind of like go together. There's like a chain reaction. So if one is off, the other one might be off as well. His orbital vector is neutral. As y'all guys can see, that line past the eye all the way down to the side of the cheekbone, and is neutral. His total facial convexity is really good, actually. He does have somewhat of a protrusive nose relative to the face, and yeah, that's why it's a tier 1. Mental labial angle is 124 degrees. He doesn't have too much protrusion on the lower lip as much, and his chin doesn't protrude like the actual chin itself. The jaw protrudes, but the chin doesn't protrude as much. The jaw protrudes, but the chin doesn't protrude as much as it needs to. So that's why I got a tier 3, which is still in the normal range. Facial convexity is very, very good. Um, like I said again, it's not too round and it's not too flat, so that's why it's at 161 degrees, which is tier one. His nasal projection, like I said, is not enough nasal projection. Um, but although his facial convexity was total facial convexity was good, um, is because like I said again, his face is not too flat or not too rounded, but the nasal projection itself is not protruded enough. So it's at 0.41, which is a flaw. His nasal width to height projection is actually pretty good. He doesn't have a very small, short nose or anything like that. Um, or scrunched up nose, I should say, at 0.78, so 78%. So that's pretty good. His racket E line, so from the tip down to the chin, the bottom lip is supposed to be 2 millimeters behind, and then I think the upper lip should lie 4 millimeters behind. And as you guys can see, that's not happening, so that is a flaw. H line, the bottom lip is supposed to be touching, barely touching the line, and as you guys can see, it is a little bit past that line, just a little bit past it. The S line is a flaw as well. It's supposed to be actually in line with the line, but as you guys can see, it's over the line. And burstal line is really good, 3.5 millimeters for the upper lip and 2.2 millimeters for the bottom lip. And as you guys can see, that's what it is. Nasal mental angle is good at 132 degrees. So it's pretty much the relationship between the nose and the chin as well. And as you guys can see, it's good. And this is the gonian to mouth relationship. You want your gonian to be below the mouth. And as you guys can see, his gonian is way past the mouth line, way past the mouth line. And this is one of the longest ramuses I've seen in a while. Recession relative to the Frankfurt plane angle. And as y'all guys can see, like I said, his mandible is very protruded past his brow ridge. So this is a very protrusive jaw, or protrusive mandible, I should say. His brow ridge inclination is not as much as it might seem to be. It's only at 11 degrees, which is still near the ideal, but it needs to kind of go back a little bit more. His nasal tip, this is the last measurement, and it is at 139 degrees, which is not ideal. It is a flaw. His nose is too rounded near the tip of his nose. And let me go back. I just want to show y'all one thing. So him being bald, now, when he was much younger and he was modeling, and another thing about modeling is you don't have to be the best looking guy. All you just got to have is a unique face, which he does has. Obviously, y'all can see. Now, now, 39 degrees, I mean 39% for the upper third, as y'all guys can see, is a lot. Now, if he wasn't bald, that would not be 39. That would probably be closer to maybe like 29, maybe like 28, 29. And that would kind of help the adjustments for the other things as well. And his facial thirds would be even. So, like I said, as his overall score is a 5.6. Now, like Brandon Carter, right now, his rating is a 5.6. Right now, at his age, if he was much younger and I was to give him a face rating for the front, his face rating might be more like a 5.8, maybe 5.7, 5.8. So it'll be maybe I'll say like a 5.775. Let me just put it in the middle, 5.75 for the face rating if he was much younger, because some of these measurements would actually be tier one, will be ideal. So if he was much younger and he still had his hairline or whatnot, his measurements would be ideal and would be good. And like I said, another flaw was the mandible was just too flat. It was way too flat. Like I showed y'all in the other picture, 7 degrees is just way too flat. It's not down swung enough. You don't want it to be